Thanks for having me. I'm going to work off of an essay that was recently published on the website HTML Giant. It was written by Elisa Gabbert and Mike Young, and it's moves in contemporary poetry. And if you're just a fiction, if you only write fiction, if you're just a fiction writer, this still actually has a lot of value for you as well, because a lot of these moves, I mean, they're about writing memorable lines. And I can tell you, as an editor, I'm an editor of poetry, but I also read a lot of fiction too. A lot of times I'll come across something that's a really great idea, or a really great story, or really great something, and the way it's been executed is so boring or so plain that it just, I'm just astounded that someone can come up with this idea but then not take the time to do it. I don't want to use the word, but doing it in an interesting or different or unique way. And so some of these, there's I think 40 moves, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, and it's by no means a complete examples of all these different moves, but it's a really good place to start. And so I'm not going to go through every single move, but we're going to go through a few. But the first thing that got my attention in this essay was that one of the recent books I published, Carl Parker's Personation Skin, his first poem is called Autobiographia, and he has 3 moves in it, and listed in here. And I, as an editor, and I read the poem 500, 600, I don't know how many hundreds of times, and I never thought of it in terms of moves, or in terms of, I mean, I just love the poem, and it's one of my favorite poems. And so I really appreciated, kind of in a way, that this piece that I was very familiar with, but how they kind of like, and see, he did this here, he did this, that there, and I was like, oh, maybe that's why I liked it. So let's first go to, I think it's 31 is his first move. Yes, 31, which will be on page 5 of Move 31 is breaking a line as to stack a repeated word on top of itself. And they give a number of examples, and I'll read them all. The first one is from Mary Jo Bang's November Elegy. November is more of the usual November. And then another example from Mary Jo. She remembers his hat. And what you do, the syntax of an action versus the syntax of deliberate action. And then they use an example by, I know Barrel House Boys love Jen Knox. So, small on Sunday. We woke up under an overpass on I-90. At least the underside looked like I-90. And then from Carl's poem. Consider this more like a drawing, a picture of someone drawing. So, we have these examples here of, repetition. I mean, I like repetition a lot of times in poetry, but it's, and repetition does appear in fiction as well, but there's a way of doing it in a way that it's, where you belabor a point and it's annoying or it's not annoying. Like, it can be funny, or it could be interesting, or it could just be like, I get it. And so I think these are all some examples of where they repeat it. Consider this more like a drawing of a picture of someone drawing. I mean, we get it, he's drawing, but I don't find it annoying. And then we'll go to 36, correcting a cliche. As an editor, I'm always amazed at how many cliches I get in poems from, I assume, beginning writers, but actually not always, because there's a lot of writers I know who aren't beginners who send cliches. And so this is something, if you have a cliche or you find that you're writing a cliche, why don't you just correct it? Instead of taking it out completely. And she uses the example, it's 36. Life is scared. Dogs only rarely eat other dogs. And then the last example she uses is compound nouns words. And I do this a lot in my writing as well. First example, and it's 38. That was pretty much the story of my life. So he combines pretty much. And then from Grand Central Terminal by Darcy Denigan. 1913. The girl ghost died here in a gas explosion. So then we have the girl ghost. Ghost girl. Yeah, I mean girl ghost. Yes. Did I say ghost girl? Anyway, girl ghost. So let's go look at Carl's poem now. It's It's the next page. So let's see how these poetry moves work in the full poem. Autobiographia. That was pretty much the story of my life in profile. I keep thinking about glass, but don't know what to say, when continually thugs come to me in a dark alley, disguised as you, only a you made of glass, shattering back together. But that's all behind me now. I'm much better than I was, a study in human behavior, the particular sort of a person who says and does these things. In public, which is the region of my soul, oh thou. I consider this more like drawing, a picture of someone drawing, water from a well that figures prominently in a children's book, about the ins and outs of rigor mortis, about their relationship to fucking. Ouch! Or excuse me, I erupted again. That's not the right word. Life is scared. Dogs only rarely eat other dogs. It's just a myth about our time, like the fish that ate Pittsburgh. I was born underwater eventually, wherever found shattering in bright green reeds. That's the honest truth. I work for the city too, you guessed it, a tax collector. But right, who cares? Each sketch is action in a frame advancing without expectation. In other words, without end. So the speaker in this poem, I mean, gives you his little spiel about himself and his little autobiography, and which could be really boring, I suppose. But I mean, the way Carl works in these moves, I mean, it keeps the pace fast. I mean, the pretty much, and then the bright green reads. I mean, you don't pause. At least I don't pause when I read that. I don't. It doesn't seem. They're words that seem. I could see that as a word together, and it's not, but it is. And I'm just like. So we'll go to the next one. Which is the Green Street, which is number 4. The blank of blank construction, which Will pointed out earlier is a very old poetry trick, but some tricks are classic. And they use the examples, they use 3 examples. Examples from Marriage Proposal by Sarah Messer. I want to be trapped by the cage of your ribs. And then from Synchronized Swimming by Angela Sorby. How did decay work its way into the theater of water? And then the last one is, I want you to see me by Kate Greenstreet. Red and blue and the white of my transparency. So let's check out Kate's poem. It's right after Carl's. Someone else want to read this? Why don't we have someone read this? Who wants to read a poem? I'm already tired of my own voice.
Dan Grady.
Dan, so you have a copy.
I have a copy now. I want you to see me, Kate Greenstreet. Perhaps you can hear me better if I face on. A crime had turned me into a phone. I tried to get sympathy from Michael, but he thought it was funny. It hurt to laugh, but I had to. My receiver was transparent. I kept saying, but Mike, I'm a phone. I was still a person in a way. I still had my legs. It was on the level of having a terrible deformity, or only one purpose, and not one I chose. I wanted him to care, but he was being so Mike. There was a flag or something patriotic on me, imprinted near the dial, red and blue and the white of my transparency. I couldn't even be a regular phone.
Thank you. So does this count for flash fiction? Would this fall into that realm? Yes, it's fiction. So it's a poem. But there we go. I mean, and a lot of Kate's work would probably fall into that gray area of going into both. But so this is a flash fiction as well because it takes a moment. Is that?
But also, it's all about sentences.
It's all about sentences. So would you argue this wasn't a poem?
No, I would never ever do that.
I mean, not the. I mean, would you?
I would argue it is a fiction.
It is a fiction. No, because honestly, I couldn't argue that. I would just. Kate identifies herself. She identifies as a poet. The next example is 32. That would be page 5. And this uses an example of a poem by Schaefer Hall.
Who I believe is reading in DC this Sunday.
Yes.
If anyone's interested.
Where,
I think he's reading at the In Your Ear series, which is at DC Arts Center in Adams Morgan.
yes.
It'll be Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Yes, I can't make it. Yeah, he's his No Tell Books published his first book as well, and this is from his poem Evelyn's Kitchen. What whirling ritual is this? I'm sorry. The move is ending a poem with a question. That would be helpful. So he ends. What whirling ritual is this? What does this dance mean? What are the shapes that I know? The thing where you can run a risk when you end a poem or a story with a question is, I mean, it could be kind of a cop-out possibly. If I mean, it could just be you don't know how to end it, so you, or it could be really interesting, like, and maybe you guys can decide. Well, we'll read Schaefer's full poem. This next poem. I'll read it. Evelyn's Kitchen. The sun from the late afternoon staples the towels to the counter in Evelyn's kitchen. It staples me to this moment in her chair. Evelyn emerges apron-tied from the back of her house. She can move freely despite the chilly light. She moves around with tasks I cannot premonish until they are performed. They involve vegetables and blades and other devices. What whirling ritual is this? What does this dance mean? Where are the shapes that I know? So, does this work as a part, ending the poem as a question? Yes? Anyone want to say no? I mean, I won't be offended if this. Well, why do you think it works?
Oh, I mean, I just think because it leaves it on this sort of winsome note, and that's the mood of it is what I like about it so much. It fits everything else that came before. It wouldn't work without it, but put it all together.
Because he does. He makes a leap. Where are the
Yeah.
shapes that I know? And he's describing the kitchen, but we're not really. He's not working in squares and triangles and all that. It is a surprise, and it's I found it to be a rewarding ending. And why don't we go to the first, on the first page, the first revision. This is by Alice Fulton. And it's exposed revision is the move. At least embarrassment is not an imitation. It's intimacy for beginners. The orgasm no one cares to fake. I almost admire it. I almost wrote despise. So, she almost wrote despise. She could have, edited that. There's a reason she chose to say I almost did this or I almost did that. I know personally especially when I send email and things, I almost always write lots of things, and we keep them in. A lot of times poems, I'll see poems with someone or blog posts even where someone will use the strike through and what they almost wrote or they were gonna write, and so I find that very kind of interesting. And there's another variation, revision by the way of I mean, by Suzanne Wise. I can only imagine how hard it must be for you to believe me. I mean, to hold blame. I mean, to be you. So why don't we just look at Alice Fulton's poem about face. Let somebody else read that. Who's going to read it? How about you?
Me?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah. Okay. Here we
I'll
go.
get you on the camera.
Hey guys, back at home. All right, About Face by Alice Fulton. Because life's too short to blush, I keep my blood tucked in. I won't be mortified by what I drive or the flaccid vivacity of my last dinner party. I take my cue from statues posing only in their shoulder pads of snow. All January you can see them working on their granite tans. That I woke at an ungainly hour, stripped off the merchandise that clothed me, distilled to pure suchness, means not enough to anyone for me to confess. I do not suffer from the excess of taste that spells embarrassment. Mothers who find their kids unseemly in their condom earrings, girls cringing to think that they could be frumpish as their mothers. Though the late, non-erotic Elvis in his studded gut of jumpsuit made everyone squeamish, I admit. Rule 1, the king must not elicit pity. Was the audience afraid of being tainted? This might rub off on me. Or were they, surrendering, what a femme word, feeling solicitous, glimpsing their fragility in this reversible purples of unwholesome goldish chains? At least embarrassment is not an imitation. It's intimacy for beginners, the orgasm no one cares to fake. I almost admire it. I almost wrote despise.
Thank you. So, I mean, the poem itself, I wouldn't say is full of, well, it really reads kind of more, you know, like a very narrative poem, and then at the end, it becomes very conscious. I mean, the poem is speaking about embarrassment and sort of speaking about, you know, the king must not elicit pity. It's a very kind of, you know, in a way, kind of judgmental poem, and it kind of, and then at the end, it just works its way to this part where it's like, I mean, it's almost the, it turns very critical on itself, the speaker. Not very critical, but very like, and look, and here, see, I almost did this. It being both critical of what it speaks of, and also as well as I almost, you know, I almost admire it. No, I almost despise it. There's a few more in here that we're not going to read the full poems, but I just thought were interesting as well. And this is all working up to the exercise we're going to do. Hopefully this will become kind of useful to what the last two exercises you just did. But let's go to 13. I just find these kind of funny. Extreme ironic egotisms. The examples. And these are by, these first two are by, is it Chison? Dan Chison?
I think so, yeah.
How will you know what my poem is like until you've gone down my ravine? Then another example is, I was the West once. I was paradise. And then another example by Matthias, is it Sabellini? Oh, you don't know. I keep looking at the poet here. I say everyone's interesting names. Sorry. I wasn't going to tell you about my boats, but now I want to tell you about my boats. The kind of the bravado that these lines take on can really kind of, you know, can kind of, you know, take a reader aback, or possibly, I mean, because you have to kind of buy into the, you either have to find it funny or you find it off-putting, because it's either it's hilarious that you don't know what a poem is like until you've gone down my ravine, or, I mean, so that's another kind of line you have to walk is, am I coming off like an asshole, or, you know, do chicks think I'm witty? I just noticed, you know, that all these examples were written by men, but that's, women do it as well. I think it wasn't very nice if they just used 3 guys like that. All right, there. Maybe we'll talk about one more. Let's go to 41. A little bit about this earlier. Illogical causation. And this is by Sabrina Olamar. Walter B. was so relieved he slept in his boots. It's kind of, you know, as was mentioned earlier, that it gives you a kind of glimpse of how a brain is working, how the mind of the narrator is working. That, you know, and this is obviously in third person. It's not first person, but it's you know, he's so relieved that he slept in his boots. And I personally, as an editor, like a lot of poems that kind of do that, that I don't know what to expect, that I don't know what's going to come next, and that give me new ways to look at that. And I like that as well as in fiction. So the assignment, the exercise is, you guys can look over these and read all of them if you like, or skip around, but you guys have written at least two pieces here, and now it's time to do a little revision on them. Now what you can do is, a couple things, is you can rewrite some of the lines you've already written using some of these moves, or you can work them into your piece. But I mean, I've heard a few of them, and I think there's probably a lot of really good things that have been started, and we can take a little bit of time now to kind of flesh them out a little bit, and making it interesting. So if you sent me your story or your poem, I would go, yeah, that was a great idea, but they really didn't spend any time working on the writing. So I would say try to do 3. I mean, if you can do 1, that's great. If you can do 5, that's better. But how much time do we have here, Dave?
We have about half an hour, so you want to give them like 10 or 15 minutes?
That's, yeah.
And I think it's starting to get louder down there.
Yeah.
More crowded as people try to use this bathroom, so.
So what, I think 10 minutes will be fine.
Okay, let's do 10 minutes and then come back and people can read some of the stuff and then we'll.
And then,
wrap up.
okay, sounds good to me.